Welcome everybody to Thursday concept arting with me, your host. How is everybody doing? Yeah, doing pretty good. Ish. I mean, you'll notice something's a little bit different with the stream here, in that we've got a more square layout for the Photoshop file. That's because my old Cintiq is malfunctioning, and so I'm using my super old Cintiq, the 21UX, so it's a very square format. So we've got this kind of dead space over my camera there, but we still see the artwork, which is nice, and then my face doesn't get in the way. But yeah, these things happen. So I'm using a little Wacom bamboo today. So it's a little bit to get used to, for myself at least, in that it's, I'm not used to drawing on a flat surface and looking somewhere else for the mark making. So it's something I used to do a lot more when I first started in the industry. None of us had Cintiqs, if we were lucky enough to have digitizers. They were pretty rudimentary. So remember, I worked at Electronic Arts and somebody was selling this like 12 by 12 tablet, which had like a serial connection, everything, and I spent way too much money on it. But it was really cool. It's my first digitizer, so I'm just having to kind of go back to that space a little bit. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah, technology indeed at its finest. Staying safe with the virus. Yeah, we're getting a bit of an uptick in the virus count where I'm at. So, and there's this picture of a beach that's here in Vancouver where people are just rammed together at sunset. So I imagine we'll probably get some, like everybody else is getting, second, third, fourth waves. So I think it's sort of going to be what we get to look forward to for the next little while here. So, but coping. Not as bad as Britain, I imagine. Yeah, it didn't seem like the effort was there in the beginning, but I think it became more serious later. But just humans. Well, we'll figure it out, or we won't. Cool. So just a rundown today. We're gonna pop a little bit more texture in the clouds. We're gonna maybe work with a bit of quick texture in the trees, and then we're gonna kind of wrap up some of the lighting in here and call it a day on this piece, and then we'll maybe start in on a prop piece after that. So let us dig into it here. So this is where we kind of ended last time. Really trying not to do extra work on the piece outside of the stream, just so we can see sort of like the timing of the 2 hour streams, like how long it would take to create this piece. I mean, I do end up talking a bit in the stream, so it's not super indicative of the scope of time that you need to create a piece, but we get a kind of a sense of it in there. So so one of the things that I want to do in this piece is I do want to start getting maybe some cloud texture in here. Just to start that up. Let's get rid of the general brushes. Let's see if we can go find that cloud brush. Start a new layer just so we don't mess things up. That's got some interesting mark making in it. Let's turn that on just so we can kind of test the stroke. Maybe a bit blocky. See what else we can kind of create in here. Art school in the fall. Got your first choice in accommodations. That's awesome. That's scary though. It was your first time being on your own. Well, you can do it. You can do it. I remember I moved out when I went to art school, or fine arts. I moved out from my parents' place because I basically went into university straight out of high school. And my dad didn't have much faith in my being able to make it on my own. Thanks, Dad. No, he's great. But yeah, it was pretty frightening for me. But once you kind of get out there, it's fine. I mean, it's just kind of learning to take care of yourself in that regard, right? At least for me, I was coming out of high school, so I was very young. Might be different for you. I don't like any of these brushes so far. Neither do your parents. I think it's always a sort of like people being worried about their kids, right? Sort of like, what are they gonna make it? I don't know. Just stay home. But I think it's really good for you to get out of there. Good for people, I would say, in general. This one's a little bit like canvas. Not loving it. Let's see if we can kind of roll up in here. See if we can find some of that cloud action. This is kind of, these are trees. See, these would be good trees for more of like a realistic scene, like maybe a jungle. For me, though, the texture's maybe a bit too much for if we want to put some more of those kind of leafy trees in there. As I mentioned before, I love just hanging out with some of these brushes and playing with them just for mark making's sake, right? Clawed. There we go. That's kind of an interesting cloud texture. See if we can apply that to the actual clouds in here. Let's pick these guys. I'm just going to lay it in as a general texture to see if I like it. Yeah. One of the things that I am intending to do later is when we get into the when we get into the lighting, say we'll turn on the VTAR here. So when we get into this kind of lighting, it can be a case of where we go and select the clouds, alpha lock those clouds, and then go back up into the the lighting layer, and then use that to lay in some of that texture. Whoops. That's not the effect I want. Let's actually turn this off for now. Turn that on. We'll leave that on. But we've got a linear dodge there. I'm just going to make another one real quick. Use some of that darker red orange. Go find those clouds. And then use our selection transparency lock. Then go back up into that. And then kind of start to kind of paint in with that that brush, right? See if we can get some of that cloud texture coming through. Let's make that a bit smaller. So it's really, I mean, I've created this other rounded volume of the cloud by lasso tooling into it. So I'd have to go back and do the same thing if I wanted that effect. So what I'm investigating with this is sort of like the edge of that cloud. Would that feel good as a texture? To bring some of that, maybe even make that bigger. To make some of that texture feel a little bit more believable, while still having that kind of rounded edge on the outside. Maybe. I don't mind it, but don't know. Let's turn that other one on, see how that feels. Deselect. Yeah, I guess it could work. I might just, kind of like what we did with the grass, I might want to try and start pulling some of this around with other kind of, maybe some sort of rake. Because when you look at clouds, you do get that sort of like wisp vibe, as well as kind of the harder edge look to the cloud. So yeah, I feel like that could be something, definitely something that we work with in there. I would just have to kind of come into this layer and probably get rid of that mask, because that was there just for a visual target. Now we actually want to start applying these things. We don't want it to blow out too much. So yeah. Worry about the virus because they're international and local students. Oh yeah, no, that makes sense. It'll be tough for schools, I think, going forward, brick and mortar schools, where you get people actually sitting in a room, because obviously that's, worst case scenario. I mean, that's the lucky thing for CG Spectrum, is that it's remote, so it's safer there. But I think those schools are just going to have to figure out ways of pivoting around that kind of thing. Permanently moving to the USA or Canada. Yeah, well, I mean, it's good for the work. I mean, there still is stuff in the UK, but there's more work I would guess over here, just in sort of Canada and the US in terms of the industry. Will I do photo bash video? How I approach it. So we did cover photo bash in our matte painting, right, which you went through, I believe. So it's the same thing, right? The reason we talk about the non-destructive editing and being very kind of particular in the matte painting class is that's better workflow to keep your photo integration clean, right? So that's we've already seen that. And then even into the environment paint over, we do a little bit of that as well. So we've got this vibe. This is this warmth in here. So we turn that warmth off. Let's see if we get that back in there. So that's feeling all right. I am going to disable that mask. Okay, so that's actually a pretty cool vibe that we got in there now that light crepuscular ray isn't coming through. So I might just actually just go with that for now. Almost feels like very dim light, right? Let's get rid of that brush layer. Very dim light overhead. So let's build that up. Let's go find those clouds again. And we can go get our cloud brush. Find that again. There it is. Hit up our linear dodge layer, label it. Why not, right? Linear dodge. Okay. A little bit of that texture in here, maybe fade it off a bit so not everything is like screaming at us. So by doing what I just did there is I can create a bit of a sharper edge on that side to indicate that there's more of that cloud back there. All right, which can be quite useful for us. I can turn my brush into linear dodge as well. Kind of start to make that a little bit more intense in there. We're gonna have the light kind of coming through this little break in the clouds, so that's where I want kind of more of my heavy dodging to happen. Make that brush a bit smaller. Picture of me in college. It's a good pick. Probably when I was in, there's a picture of me when I first started in the industry. Crazy hair, eating an apple. Courtesy of one of the people I worked with. It is interesting to look back on pictures of yourself when you're younger. Makes you feel old. So I'm liking the way this light, sort of the exposure is getting hotter near that opening, right? But I want to preserve it. I'm trying to be as careful as I can with not making kind of errant strokes if I don't have to. So I'm gonna let go of that. I want to hit this cloud up in here with a little bit more of that, so I've got to go grab the clouds again. Control G. I have my transparency set to Control G. Just a little bit easier to do that. I find I use that a lot. Everybody's different though. Okay, let's take a look at those. Looking pretty good. I might hit this other side with a little hint of that down in here. Just make it feel like the light's kind of spilling over each side. Okay, so that feels pretty good. Let's see if we can hit those back. These clouds got back here. Clouds 2. Control G, those bad boys. And do the similar thing. I'm probably going to engage in another linear dodge here because I want to be able to control that separately. No, my sister, my parents and my sister weren't that sad about me leaving home. I lived in the same town, so it was fine. When did you start practicing to become a concept artist seriously? I kind of remember a point. It had actually to do with Jurassic Park. The film came out. I loved the film. I wanted to do that kind of thing, but I had kind of been setting myself up. I thought animation was the thing, and that was for kind of being creative with drawing outside of illustration. That was sort of what I thought I could do, and I was making like claymation videos. I was trying to get into animation that way because I love claymation still, but it was still a kind of a fairly popular form back then. But then this art book came out, The Art of Jurassic Park, and it was all Stan Winston and all the concept art that went into the film, which I loved. And I kind of realized at that point that there was a thing that was concept art, right? Designing these things. And I just fell in love with it at that point. I was just like, blinders on, I'm going for that. So that was probably, I mean, man, I'd have to Google when that happened. Jurassic Park. When did that come out? 1993. Okay, so there you go. 1993 is when I decided I wanted to be a concept artist. And so I focused all my efforts on kind of designing and drawing and that kind of thing. And I went through fine arts school because I didn't have much of a choice where I was at for any sort of illustration or commercial art. But I mean, a big part of what we do is having a foundation and learning how to draw, right? As an artist, and then you move into kind of commercial art from there. So that's sort of when I was into it. I remember being so excited when Jurassic Park came out on VHS. I went to the store and I pre-ordered a copy on VHS. That's how old I am. So, yeah, but that's a good question. Let's go back up here. Try and get that window out of our way. So let's see how the effect is. One of the risks of doing some more of this this work with linear dodging behind this current layer is that anything that is transparent in terms of a pigment is going to maybe start to show through, which could be an effect we want, but we'll see how it goes. The way I want to create these volumes is I want to make it feel like the light's cutting through a perspective space and not just kind of layering these things flat. So I do want to be careful about how this comes across in here. So even the shadow shapes are things that you want to be cognizant of in terms of the shape of them, right? You don't want to just be making kind of strokes for the sake of making strokes. You want them to look good, right? So just being careful with that. I might actually make my brush a little bit smaller in there. What age am I? I'll give you a hint. I'm very, very, very close to being 40. Which sounds weird even for me to say. Never figured I'd be a 40-year-old person, but who does? It just happens. Yeah. 'Tis crazy, the whole aging thing. But thanks for the compliment. I'm happy to be older. It's enjoy my life more and more as I get old. Not everybody does, but I do. So let's take a look at those. Oh, those feel pretty good up there in the sky. And let's grab those back ones. Cloud 3, do the same thing. And try and layer some of that in there. So we'll go back up. And another, let's remember to name our layers LD. LD. And now we can pop in some of that stuff up in here. Whoops, actually turn the layer to a dodge. So I'm going to be a little bit softer. I don't want to draw too much attention to the intensity of that rear cloud. Just a little bit, maybe even some on the back side in here. And you'll see sort of the effect that I'm going to achieve. This is sort of what I'm talking about. I'm starting to paint over the other cloud now, but I want that to be a shadow silhouette that I'm popping out. So we'll figure out a way to fix that in a minute. Likewise over here. Just subtly kind of bring in some of that in there. Then deselect, I'm going to go back to Cloud 2. Create that, go back to our LD for Cloud 3, and then press delete. And then what that'll do is it'll cut those kind of edges of those clouds back in. I mean, something else we could do with this is with our clouds, we could actually get some darker values coming in to give them a bit more volume. If I were to do that, it would be a multiply layer. So we could actually layer that in over top. So let's go mult. We'll start naming it mult 1 just so that we can be a bit more specific about which cloud layer. I mean, we could say mult cloud 1, CLD 1. Turn it to multiply and then grab that blue and see what kind of effect that has just quick over top with that cloud brush. It doesn't feel too bad. I don't know if I want it to be that dark though, so if that were the case, I'd have to make it a lot lighter because we're multiplying, just so that the effect isn't as profound. Right? So something like that. So that seems to work. So I can go grab CLD1, do my thing, go back up to multiply, and then hit that. So you see that I'm painting over the mountains as well, right? Whoops, we got a linear dodge. Abort. There we go. I can just go and select those individual mountain layers and do the same thing we did with the other clouds, and just delete some of that. One of the things that's happening is there's a little bit of saturation, a little bit too much saturation kind of coming in there. So if I really wanted to reduce that, then I'm just going to pick this saturation vector and lower it. I look younger than that. Are you the big brother then? No, I'm the younger brother. Treading 40. Oh, really? Yeah. No, I don't think it's that bad. Have you come up with any ideas of what type of props you're going to do in a video? Yeah, I was thinking I like to kind of theme these for games that are coming out that are interesting and popular. One of the games that came out today is called Carry On. And I had my eye on it for a little bit, and it's sort of like this sort of creature, alien, abomination thing breaks out of a containment unit and goes around consuming people and finding its way out, I guess, of containment. And so, you know, maybe like a container, right? That looks interesting. We can kind of think about maybe some of the mechanics of it and how it can look in as a shape. Very interesting. And there's a lot of kind of effects that we can do with refraction and that kind of thing within a containment unit like that with render. So I think that would be fun. Yeah, I fired it up just briefly this morning to see what it was like. Didn't get very far. Um, but yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty. I'm loving the sort of resurgence of these side-scrolling games. There's so many now, but it's just simple, right? Don't have to kind of dedicate your life to being good at these games and competing like you would with all of the modern military shooters like Call of Duty. I was just thinking about that the other day. It's just like this the competitive quality of those games now, because I think a lot of people want to become professional streamers, right? So they want to be seen being good at a game, so they're sitting there practicing all hours of the day, and then get people that have full-time jobs that log in just for some fun. You just get smashed by these people who are almost like lifers, right? Lifers at the game. So it's a bit frustrating, but it is what it is. Never used to be that way, I would say, as a young gamer growing up, because no one cared. There was no streaming. There was none of that. It was just sort of like having fun. So I think people were a lot less serious about it. You could go and do like, fighting games always had, say, Evo, that kind of thing, to where you could go and compete if you wanted. But now it's sort of like that competition level. It's just, you get crushed out there. So this darker value, I think I am going to leave it just in, maybe I'll try it in some of the, like Cloud 2 or something like that, but I don't want to kind of go too far with it. Maybe we'll hop over to our smudge brush just to see if we can kind of integrate that a little bit more. But what I was going to say is I don't really want that to be something where we're getting even distribution of contrast all the way back through each layer of cloud, because then they'll all feel like they're kind of flattening against the surface, right? If they share contrast like that. So sometimes it can be really good to mix it up a little bit. Let's take a look at that. Not feeling too shabby. I'm going to leave those back cloud layers. I can always do that later. I am going to start to name these, though. Let's go LD, CLD1, LD, oops, CLD2, and then last but not least, LD, CLD3. Come on. Are you playing the bad guy? Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, you're murdering people and eating them. But yeah, it's just an interesting kind of turning that sort of protagonist antagonist on its head. And some of the mechanics of you crawling around in the space and eating and getting bigger and getting these sort of like abilities as you consume DNA. It's pretty cool. About Creeks game, visually gorgeous. You should check it out. Creeks and Knots. So I'll check it out. Yeah. Did I play any of the Mario games on Game Boy? Yeah, I played. I can't believe. I mean, thinking about playing the Game Boy now, God, it was so difficult to actually see that screen. There's one game on there that was a sub hunting game. I loved that game. I can't remember what it's called now. But yeah, I played everything from Commodore to Coleco to obviously Nintendo and Sega Genesis and Master System and all of those things, right? The Game Gear, the Lynx. I was all in on video games. It's probably why I went into video games as a concept artist. Looks awesome. I'll have to check that out. Did you collect comics? Do I? I don't. Did I? Yes. I wasn't serious about collecting comics. I just liked to read comics and look at the artwork. So I had collected some that I liked, but I never had a serious collection. And house got broken into and robbed, so they took my comics, which is weird. Because none of them were worth anything, but they took them. So, have I played Limbo? Yeah, I've played Limbo. Definitely a good game. The other game they made where you're trying to run out, and then I don't want to ruin it, but I can't remember the name of the game. The next game that they made was really good. As well, I like that more. Okay, so like we're gonna have to decide here. I'm gonna drop another linear dodge layer in, and I'm gonna start hitting some of these outcroppings of rock. Now, if we hit everything evenly, it can start to kind of maybe be a bit too much, so we got to be careful about that. But I want to kind of start to build that in. So we'll do LD. Maybe we'll deal with the front layers first. I think at this point, because some of these things are they're spaced so far apart, like the cliff layers up in here, the trees and the layers down in here, I think we can actually share a layer for all of that rather than kind of making this layer stack like 1,000 layers deep. And so I'll call that sort of FG MG, just to kind of go from foreground, middle ground. And we'll say 1, might as well kind of categorize it. And we'll throw that on linear dodge. And so we'll go back into some of that warm orange into here. Okay. And we can start laying that in. So again, maybe we go and select actually, I might just kind of paint on top, and then what I might do later is go in and select the individual chunks and then delete anything outside of that. So let's just attack that. So I don't really want the texture of the clouds here, so I will probably have to change that brush. And just seeing what that might look like. Sort of a blobby, scratchy texture. Maybe not convinced by that necessarily. Maybe we go with something that's a bit more... I kind of want something that's pinched. That's interesting. Keyboard, there's Atari. Atari didn't have a keyboard necessarily. I know Commodore 64 basically did. Oh, Stray, I think. Just Robotic World. Oh, I saw that. That was at yeah, recently. Yeah, that looks amazing. I'll definitely get into that. Brickleberry or Mr. Pickles. I have not. I don't, to be honest, I don't watch much television or film. I'm not a huge fan of watching television or film. I don't know, it's definitely me. I don't like sitting and being passive in the entertainment. That's why I do like video games, is I like to be a part of the storytelling, making decisions and whatnot. Maybe it's I have some attention deficit potentially, but yeah, so I don't actually end up watching a lot of stuff. My backlog would be kind of hilariously long for those kinds of things. So I do make time for the odd thing. Like one of the things that I really want to watch is Primal. because that seems to be more my vibe. But if I do, I will check those out. So still kind of trying to find what texture works for me. I'm not loving some of these, but you know, I'm not stressing out about having to rush myself to pick one yet. I just want to make sure that I like it and that I have some control over what's going on with that. You know, I can also get in here with some blending to see if that feels pretty good. Yeah, maybe. Go with something that has a texture. I kind of like that. I might go with that. Use some breakup in the brush tip shape. See what this one's like. I kind of like this one a little bit more. All right. So, give you a sense of sort of what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of come in here and just start to hit some of these surfaces. And then I can go find them individually. Cliff faces. See if we turn those on and off. Okay, so we can do that sort of selection and press Control-Shift-I to invert the selection. So instead of selecting the actual rock face, we're selecting everything outside of it. And then I can go through there with, say, an eraser. Oops. Make sure you actually go back to our dodge layer. And then we'd be able to erase that. Right, so some of these trees don't belong in that layer, so you know I'm going to blast those away for now. Right, if I'm only looking at just working the cliff, then that can be a way of kind of just affecting that. So there's a couple choices here about like how we're going to affect things and maybe make the process of creating this lighting setup efficiently. And erasing's fine, but masking might be a little bit different so that I can kind of zoom in and cut things in here and there, right? So let's maybe work with that instead. So if I were to go with that direction, then the way I can kind of go about this is, is kind of just going in, kind of hitting some of that stuff where I think it'll happen. Right. I could get some of these guys in here. Even some of the grass up in here. Some of the stuff in here, maybe a little bit of our rocks in there. And then if I do add a mask to that, you know, I can always go in and paint it out. Even with the same brush, right? Because then you're going to get a little bit of that quality of texture coming through. And it's not just going to be like a hard edge brush, so you can reserve some of that texture. If I screw up, I just go back the other way. Oops, which is nice. So the sort of catch-22 with this is like if I wanted to finesse any of these strokes now and use say a smudge tool, I can't really do that once I've masked this stuff out. So I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between thinking, you know, like, is this maybe what I want to do first, or maybe at the end I can go in and mask out anything that's not working really well. I'm thinking that might be the best case scenario for us, just so that I have a tiny bit more control overall. So we'll just let's disable that. I'm actually going to get rid of it for now, and we'll come back to it. Mrs. Your Mind Up. Stranger Things. Yeah, I watched the first season of Stranger Things. New season. Yeah, people are enjoying it still. I got what I wanted out of it. I haven't watched anything other than the first season, but hear that it's good. Are you the only one that likes horror? Because I am in my family. It's funny, like, I like creature horror. I'm not so fond of jump scare horror, teen slasher flicks, right? Any of the, like, Halloween, anything like that. I don't know what it is. I mean, maybe I'm just too anxious with that kind of thing. I have friends that love it. Didn't collect Pokemon cards. Wasn't into Pokemon at all. Do I read books? Read Stephen Hawking's books. I have read an inordinate amount of art criticism in university, and not fond of reading after that, to be honest. But I love the act of it. It's just not something that I find I do a lot. If anything, I'd rather sit down and draw. But you know, one of my favorite books is King Solomon's Mines. I think they're a Master Jack attacks her. They could, yeah. I mean, Crash and Spyro, I think, are. I guess you'll see if they sell well right at this point. But I'd imagine anybody. I mean, Mafia's getting remastered, and I had no idea. I wasn't paying attention to that, and I played the first Mafia the first time it came out, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm like, what are they gonna do, you know, in the remaster? And the remaster looks amazing. So I'm definitely going to tuck into that one. That one looks really good. Might actually start in on some erasing here. I feel like masking is great because I can pull texture back out, but I don't know how much of that I'm actually going to do to make my life a bit easier here. I might be a bit better just continue to work that texture in and just erase into it. Some nice quality of line in there. We could get back into some of the trees down in here. So let's see if we can kind of work that tree texture in. I mean, alternatively, I could go find that tree brush and do that. I could just use my eraser though. Get a bit closer to this. And kind of make a little bit of those tree marks at the base. And do this kind of thing, right? As long as those marks seem legitimate. This is where I want to kind of start to fade that in. Maybe into the grass a bit. Kind of more fond of the grass being a bit of a softer vibe than the rock face. So just that feels like more of like a gradient at that point. And then, of course, we can come in and just cut along that edge. Being careful. If I really want to lock it up, then I can go find the grass layer. Right. Cliff top. That's the one. Hit our G button. And then we go back up into that area, and then I can kind of I can just use my eraser to go and blast anything out that doesn't belong. Then I can shift I and even go back in with some of that texture in there. I want to pull that stuff up to the edge. I'm kind of pulling it too far away, but that's all right. A rake is pretty good for this kind of thing, so trying to find something like a claw rake is a bit better, so it doesn't kind of clump the pigment up. At least that's the vibe that I'm going for, because what I'm trying to match is the kind of striations of the strokes that I made before. So it matches. It doesn't look weird. Eraser. You have to use a lot of the tilt function in this with the bamboo that I'm using, just because it's not at all what I'm used to. So I'm glad to have it. It's pretty good that they added that finally after years of having to kind of just move your Cintiq. Wasn't always ideal. Oops. You could probably be a lot more precious about a space like this, because it is going to be kind of one of the closer things to the camera, and then you'd want to maybe get that right for sure. So some of the light on that cliff's now starting to feel way too saturated, right? I'm really liking how soft that is because I know I'll be able to come back in there and hit more of that as I go. Learning Unreal Engine. No. Recommended as concept artist to learn it from Blizzard and Avalanche. I mean, I could see the usefulness of being aware of how the engine works, right? I would say it'd be more important for you to know if you're going to learn a package, it would be something 3D so that you can understand the modeling process and understand what you're designing for. Unity is sort of up there with more indie developers as well. You can see that Epic's trying to make Unreal a lot more useful to everybody now that they have that competition. But learning the engine itself as a concept artist, I maybe for Blizzard and specifically Blizzard, they would have needs for that, but by and large at those specialized companies, more of what's going to be the case is that they're going to have specialist people for that. As a concept artist, you're going to be kind of heavily tasked with creating that 2D art. So I'm not sure what specifically they're pointing to there. Going to push your storyboard skills further. Nope, I am not. It's what you have to understand about concept art is that not every concept artist is the same. You'll have people that say specialize in storyboards. I worked with a storyboard artist on Raccoon City, and he was really good at the sequential storytelling aspect, but he wasn't great at the kind of finished art end of things, right? So you can specialize in these different areas. You can kind of be a broad generalist that goes into storyboard and sequential art storytelling, but if you spread yourself too thin, you're going to be kind of you're going to find it difficult to fit a wider variety of specific job types, right? So, I forgot to mention last time that people were impressed by your mentoring skills. Naturally, they asked me who mentored me. Nice. Yeah, Unity's really good. I know friends that work exclusively in Unity because they find it a lot easier to code, for instance, right? And whereas other people swear by Unreal. I've heard more of the people like being attracted to Unreal in the last couple of years. Before that, it was sort of like, it's sort of like your brand, right? If you prefer, a certain brand of design, there's so much documentation for Unity because of all of the indie developers and how it was pretty easy to get involved with it. So definitely try it out if you're interested in starting to get into actual development rather than just specifically the discipline of concept art. Learn it because it's cheaper for you can jump in and finish it. Yeah, interesting. It'd be interesting to know what the actual job role is, because that doesn't seem to be in line with a specific concept artist at a big company. In a smaller company, it would make sense. But to be putting on all those different hats at a bigger company, they're just going to have money to pay people that are better at it. Yeah. I'm not into storyboarding almost at all. Storyboarding is I know some storyboard artists that aren't concept artists. They're very specific in their storyboarding, because it is sort of like all encompassing. So I'm not going to, but in terms of knowing sequential storyboarding skills and storytelling, camera, and composition, that stuff is all really good to know. but as a storyboard artist, you'd be good to make sure that you focus on storyboarding specifically, right? Not to say that a concept artist can't do that. I'm not, but fill your boots if that's what you're into. Yeah, sounds like you're interested in kind of branching out and seeing. I mean, I know specifically for you that you were interested in that, so that would maybe be your side specialty. So definitely get into it if you dig it. So I like the way this is kind of coming out onto this cliffside. I'm going to erase some of the stuff in behind the trees, though. Because obviously they would cast shadow. I could almost make those like nice simple shapes. So that same, I'm going to pop some onto these trees. I'm going to go find those guys, tree individuals. Perfect. We'll lock those pixels. I wonder why that's not working. Oh, it's just those guys. I'm not getting a selection on those guys, which is weird. That is strange. Oh, there we go. It was selecting the mask instead of the transparency. Got it. All right. So we can come back into some of this deeper orange. Just make sure that we go all the way back up. So I'm just going to use the smudge brush to kind of remove some of that light from the sides of the tree that we don't want, to kind of like blend it upwards. Deselect those guys getting hit by that. Not feeling too bad. I could decide to kind of crawl around the side of this a little bit with some of that. Maybe I'll do that just by a hint. I don't want it to be too strong though, because I really don't want this stuff to start standing out, but maybe we just get a hint of that as it moves over onto this side. So I'm going to be a little bit messy with it because I am just going to blend it in. I'm hoping you don't work at Blizzard, Lucasfilm, or Valentine's better at it. It's just different paths, and those companies are really willing to take advantage of junior artists for the cost. Right, I am expensive, so less likely to get into that. I'm also, as I've been through the ringer, so to speak, I'm less interested in working at those larger companies at this point and more interested in my own work. So, but it is really good experience to go to those places. Also, I'm not that interested in, I mean, not that it's a huge deal now because everything seems to be kind of more remote. I'm not interested in the crunch or moving to those places. To each their own, though. Get a little bit of that kind of move around the side. We could hit this guy up here with a little bit. But it's good that you're saying that you have those opportunities. Definitely like to, should connect with our marketing person Nadia and talk about those. It'd be great to let other people know that you've got those opportunities and get the kind of specifics of it. Have a few friends in the industry that know people work at those places, so it'd be cool to see who your art director is. Where is that tree? There's the individuals again. So we grab that, watch the mask, grab the transparency. There we go. Whoops. Painting directly in that layer, so back it up, back it up, back it up. Any live streams? You can take a look on the schedule. I do believe Simon is normally at it today, but he might be on vacation. But you can look in the schedule part of the Twitch window. Who is your art director at Blizzard and Avalanche? Good to know. So always reach out to them. And just a few of these trees, a little bit of that light. Of course, we can always delete it, like I said, if we're not in love with it. Let's see how those look. Texture's a little, that's kind of nice in there. Some of those things just kind of poking out. I might actually even try and drop some of that down in here. We can set that up for later. Yeah, bad at remembering names. I am too, definitely. Be good to get those names though, so get our career development manager helping people kind of connect with those people, try and interview them even, see what made them select certain students from the school, and what it takes, what they're looking for. You can get a little bit on that rooftop as well. We're still being rough with this because it's we're not quite into the finished polish of this or anything. We can get some of that stuff hitting the rooftop, maybe even the side of the building. It's really sad music. Or I guess contemplative music. Some of that light hitting the water here, changing it a bit, which is a nice effect. And I just kind of erase this tree in here because I don't want that to be confused with what's going on down below. It's a lot more mellow than, let's turn that back on. It's a lot more mellow than having that kind of extreme warm light coming through. I mean, I don't mind that warm light, but I do feel like we could still tune it to be a little less intense, less warm. I'm gonna definitely erase some of that stuff. If I'm gonna keep it, I'm not sure I'm gonna keep it, but I at least want to kind of get rid of that stuff that I worked on out here because I think that that's nice and subtle. Currently, I don't want it to be too much something that stands out. Yeah, that's great. If you've got opportunities at Blizzard and Avalanche, and you're also able to kind of connect with Rockstar North, that would be a lot of work on your plate, as well as going to school, so watch out for that. Probably not going to do that one in there. Let's just smooth some of this stuff out because we don't want that to be too aggressive. So I'm just playing in that same layer with the original light source Being a bit more careful with it this time because I don't want it to be screaming out at us too much. I am going to erase this stuff though, as that was just kind of really basic rendering. And these guys in here are just a little too basic. Oops. And I can kind of just roughly erase into that, and then, you know, you'd have that hard edge, but you can always use your blender to kind of push into it a bit more. Just to feather it. And then we're going to get rid of this stuff over here. Remember to save. You ever get that sort of spinning thinking icon? Sometimes that can end in tears if you haven't saved. It'll just crash. So that's always a good reminder to get in there and make sure that that's saved. Let's get rid of that in there. Some of that light coming through. Let's go back up to our foreground, middle ground. And then this can be that texture. Bring up in there. Let's see what that turned off. So I kind of want to be careful of not losing some of that texture in there, but so I'll maybe kind of blend this in quite a bit. Try and follow some of that texture. Playing with. You're more career oriented or balance it out. After you work in the industry a while, you do realize that you sometimes want a work-life balance, which is something you hear a lot about. Some studios, it's you know, you get a lot of crunch time. It's called crunch time, and it's fairly normal, to be honest, because you know these entertainment products are really expensive to make, whether it be film effects or video games. So yeah, a lot of the times to make it happen, you'll have to work a lot of overtime hours, but like I said, that's fairly normal. But after a while, you know, it can definitely wear on you, so you'd make a decision at that point to have find kind of gigs that are a little bit better for that work-life balance. But as a younger artist, I quite enjoyed the effort and the long hours. Maybe not so much the long hours, but you know, you knew you had to put that effort into make it as an artist, show up, but also, you know, make sure that the product is good. So with this brush, we can go into a linear dodge mode to kind of intensify that look. If we were to do that and create a lot of kind of intense saturation and contrast up in here, then we want to be careful about kind of what that looks like, right? So I'm investigating a little bit here with whether or not I like it. I'm not entirely convinced that I want to draw a ton of attention to this area yet. So I feel like if we do that, we're going to kind of lose the house a bit as our focal point. So it might just be that the light's not really reaching us over here. So I could make this a bit bigger in terms of our smudge brush. Yeah, I'm not liking it. And my brush is going slow. So I'm gonna kind of just chop that out of there. I might lay something in softer later. So at that point, the trees in sort of the, I think this side is something else that we can work on. Get a little bit closer so we can start to kind of mess with these guys in here. So we'll do a very similar thing where we kind of lay out that scumbled texture on top of those trees, and then we can kind of come in and hit them, get about the ones that we would actually see receive light. And then we just go find that layer, G cliffs, see what that is. That's it. So we want the transparency, okay, and then we can go back up to this guy. Control Shift I to invert selection, and then we can erase. I wouldn't delete because you're going to delete everything that's outside of that, right? So you don't want that to happen. I can kind of just chop through there. If we let go of that, it sort of starts to look like a semblance of what we're after, but I want to keep it still as I'm going to go in there and kind of blend some of that stuff down. You have time, that's great. Yeah, also... think I do as props. Yeah, I mean, I've done it all in this industry over all the years, of making stylized and more realistic things. So it's very good to make sure that you do practice these kinds of things. Oops. Just trying to follow the kind of direction of the tree growth here. Get some of that mark making traveling in the right direction at least, right? And we'll be able to go in here now and use our eraser. Make it fairly small, smaller still. And then we can kind of cut in our trees. something looking like that. Why not? Let's see how that looks. That distance, not too bad. Some of that noise is maybe a bit much, so I'll get that back in there, and then I'll just go back in with the blend and then kind of just knock a little bit of that out. Whoops. Then all I have to do is kind of like drag that paint upwards and out of the selection. Just again, so we don't have the mark making feeling like it's not fitting what it is we're looking at. This music's way too emotional right now. Can't handle it. Let's go find something else. That's feeling not bad. Kind of hitting some of that. I might even kind of just get like an airbrush. So let's figure out what a brush is. Like we could opt to have maybe even go and use this tree brush in here with a sample in that layer to kind of lay those things in. They're going to be like very strong though, right? So we could always go with their opacity being fairly low. So we can kind of just cut some of that stuff in. Go to our eraser, pick the, and then chew away at that point. Just to break it up a bit. Not every single tree has got its own sort of vibe in there. See how that looks. I kind of like that better. Let's go pick this guy now. Nice thing about this is, like I said, it's like we can always change this stuff, right? Let's go with that. I'll go grab a brush and the texture. See how this one feels. Oops. I have a habit of doing that, not picking the right layer. Yeah, we're gonna do props next. Just so we're kind of not cycling through just characters, just environments, kind of going through the categories. Are you gonna do some icons like what you did with your speed hero character when designing something to go to the character's t-shirt? Maybe in the future, yeah. You could design a spaceship for next week, start to finish. What do you think? It's a possibility. I already have something in mind, so that could be something in the future. Do you know of any of the people that got success? No one's reached out. As of yet, it's I mean, that's something else to kind of think about, the expectations of something like getting into concept art is you know, it's not like the thing I always use is it's not like a pipe fitting certification course where you learn how to do it in a weekend or over a couple weeks and then you're good to go, right? It's a lot of kind of making sure that you have the artwork there, that the technical skill is there, and then, you know, networking and making sure that that stuff comes to fruition for you. It's work for sure. So likely they're still working away at it. I've seen new Looney Tunes. New Looney Tunes cartoon. I have not. Do you think this pandemic will go much longer? No idea. Probably. It's hard to say. Could be the case. Let's get rid of that tree, chop that guy out of there. I might actually use that brush, make it a lot bigger, and then just slowly kind of kill off some of this light. I don't want it to be that kind of intense. Maybe at the front of that slope, get something a little bit lighter. And I feel like it's going to kind of spill over into these trees this way. FG tree front. So these guys, we can lock those pixels. I'm going to want to find a texture brush for that. Some of those guys. Okay, we definitely need those guys. Grab them. Do a very similar job with that texture. I do want to go to my brush settings and apply a pen pressure to my shape dynamics. It's dual brush. We'll keep it the way it is. Kind of wanted to pinch that nib a bit more, but I think I can make that work. I just have to make it a bit smaller. Let's go with that, see how that feels. That's feeling pretty good. I'm not loving this one in here though. Well, maybe just hit the edge of that. Might want to just pop a few more trees that are gathering some of that in here. Let's actually grab these guys. Whoa, I get the flood of questions here from you. Here it's the tutor from Introduction to Concept Art going on Twitch. Is Kira's introduction? You might be talking about Chris. No, no plans for that. No, I haven't looked at the log. Yeah, it is interesting to see how different people are dealing with it. You get a Crash Bandicoot tattoo, and that could be cool. Have you tried building a Raspberry Pi? Have I tried building and working the Raspberry Pi, coding, creating games on it? No, that is not at all interesting to me. That is not a concept art deal, obviously. You've had a lot of caffeine. It looks like it. The stream of questions in there. No, not interested in coding. Not even in the slightest. Kudos to you if you are, though. It's very good to know if you want a job in the industry or get paid well. Let's find those guys. Those guys in the front. Okay, we need to hit those guys with some lovin'. Kind of painting over some of that with our little addition of the stuff down below. So oops. Bad habit of painting on the wrong layer. That's why it's always good to double check. I want to affect this guy in here. So we can put that up on top. something like this, it's maybe just going to be better to leave those guys in silhouette because they're going to have that nice space down below to really kind of breathe. So with that, I might go into my multiply. That's multi-cloud. We might start one that's multi-foreground. Mult FG. And we'll grab those guys in their silhouettes. FG trees. Sure that those guys grab them. Okay. And then we're going to go up into our multi-FG, grab an airbrush. General airbrush, and then we'll just kind of use some of those darker blue values to darken those guys down by a little bit. And then we create like a nice contrast with those against that kind of lit atmospheric down below. Still something that we could kind of play with is pushing and pulling some of that stuff down in around them. So it's kind of like a finishing touch, at least for today, before I have to move on. Kind of get those guys standing out a little bit more in there. So we got pretty far with it. I mean, compared to what we had going on before, we kind of go from this, get some of that lighting in there. Now it's feeling maybe a little bit more believable. Like we can sit some more dodge effects up on top if we really want it to feel overexposed coming down through the sky. Like kind of see what that would look like here. Let's just grab that. Such a struggle using the little tiny tablet I'm using. Let's get that nice and big. And you can kind of like get some of that rolling through there. You have some of that light just slightly streaking down. We kind of had it a bit aggressive before, but we could have that really kind of heavenly light poking through there, feeding down into that valley by a little bit, maybe adding a little bit of that light there. In that space, I'd probably want to develop that lower space by a little bit more, but it's a good kind of pass on this stuff. I'd probably want to finesse this a little bit more, with some time spent on some of the ambient lighting in those other spaces. But I kind of wanted to get that feeling nice and warm cutting through there, kind of epic look to it. Okay, so that's where we're gonna leave that. I might do some work on my own to tie that up, and then we'll come back to the prop stuff next week, and then we'll maybe take a peek at what I've done with it at that point. Okay, but otherwise, good chats and some good questions in there. But like I said before, try some of the stuff out on your own if you're used to doing more realistic stuff. You see, we went from the kind of zombie design to this stylized environment. Next week, we'll maybe go into something that's semi-stylized, sort of stylized realism with a prop design, and then we can kind of fluctuate back and forth between those different things and looking at different concepts as we go. Otherwise, have a good week, gang. Thanks for showing up, and we'll see you next time. Take care.